We will please stay in touch with IDA. Check out our website, aptly updated constantly by our student member, Emma, who's here tonight with us today. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We are everywhere. We are so delighted to kind of be in all the places. We are just going to jump right into the agenda. So we have some individuals. I'm about to paste into the chat. Those of you who are members of IDA, we have some voting to take place. We have 4 new candidates to the board, or new this year to be joining the board for the years 2022 to 2025, 3-year terms on the board of the local IDA chapter. The first is an individual who's very familiar with us. Previous board member from 2012 to 2021, and prior to that, a board of the International Independent Services for Educational Resources. Becca Atkinson, one of our candidates. Another candidate, Jennifer Betts, who is very excited to have a head of school joining our board, or potentially joining our board, depending on your vote tonight. We have Sue Jaffe. Sue Jaffe is a professor at George Washington University, has an EDD in special education, looking at teacher retention, been a special educator throughout the Washington area. And then finally, Jeanette Tang Yanamoto, who is a business person who we're really excited to be part of the business side of the board. As you know, that's very important. And then we have a promotion. Kathy Orr Pomerank, who is on our board now, is being promoted to the position of secretary, again, pending your vote tonight. And a very quick but very sincere thank you to our current, our board, departing board members. A quick shout out to Alan, Amy, and Annie for your wonderful service to IDA over the years. Again, I'm going really quick right now. We have something much more personal for you coming in your inboxes shortly. We also wanted to take a second as the entire board and thank Emma Gary, undergraduate student at American University, who has been our guru, our partner in getting everything IDA up to speed in terms of technology. So Emma, on behalf of the entire board, thank you for all that you do. I am about to hand it over with all of that to Aisha to talk through the work of what we're doing here. So Aisha, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Yes, yes. Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. What a way to start off your week. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are really excited to start this conversation about reading instruction and interventions for emergent bilingual students and emerging bilingual students who are receiving special education. You can go to the next slide, Dr. Belson. So I am your moderator for today. My name is Aisha Crawford, and I am currently a professional development specialist with the DC Public Schools Language Acquisition Division in the Office of Teaching and Learning. So basically, I support teachers, educators, leaders with creating programming and improving instruction to best support English language learners' academic success. So a little more about me. I started my career off in my career in education in North Carolina. Shout out to Charlotte-Mecklenburg School System. My work in the field has led me across the globe to places like Peru, Colombia, Malaysia, and now to the District of Columbia, which I love. My primary focus in education has been on language acquisition and reading interventions and supporting professional development in those specialty areas. The bulk of my work has been in the elementary space, but I've worked with all ages. I would consider myself a very curious educator, wanting to deeply understand how we better support our beautiful little human beings that we serve to blossom and be their best selves. And so this curiosity and quest for answers has led me to my doctoral studies at American University within the early literacy intervention cohort at the School of Ed. And my research and interests include I had to narrow it down because there are so many. The interests include anti-racist pedagogy, structured literacy for students of special populations, culturally responsive instruction, professional learning, facilitation, and coaching development for educators. And this drives a lot of the work that I do professionally and through my studies. Go to the next one. So throughout our conversation, you will hear terms like emergent bilingual, English language learner, English learners, and multilingual learners. All these terms in the context of this conversation tonight refer to students who are acquiring language, English language, in our school system. And so as you see the terms EB, emergent bilingual, and then multilingual learner, these terms are used in hopes of being more inclusive and culturally responsive of the diverse linguistic backgrounds that many of our students have along their journey of English language acquisition. And having diverse linguistic background is a total asset. And as we progress, we really want to make sure we highlight those assets with the terms and how we refer to our students. So this is just some of the acronyms that you could see tonight come up when we're referencing these students. Also, I wanted to bring attention to dually identified. That means that students are receiving special education and are emergent bilingual students or learning English too. Okay, so here's the fun part. Why are we here? If you've ever done a training with me, then you know that I love this illustration. We've seen many different iterations of this illustration in reference to our education system. I really like to use this illustration to ground the work that we're setting out to do. We know that our goal has been equity and to provide equitable instruction and support to all children. We can see that in the second picture. But as we take a look at the third picture in this photo, we see the word empowerment. And we don't normally see that in this picture sequence. This is one of the goals that we as educators, leaders, researchers, parents, and advocates are also working towards. This picture, the third one, shows the removal of barriers making our children feel empowered to be their best self in the learning environment. So how does this connect to reading instruction, you may ask? So foundational literacy skills are crucial to success in school, college, career, and overall life success. I believe that high quality literacy instruction is a fundamental right for our students and our children. Providing this high quality instruction, along with many other things, pushes us forward. So supporting our children and building those skills empower them to navigate not only the classrooms, but their future life. And the system that we have has not really been working for the majority of our students, especially those students from special populations, which could be homes subjected to poverty, ones receiving special education, or even students who are learning English. And the list really can go on. So the time is really now for us to align our actions and work towards that goal. You can go to the next one, Dr. Belson. So with that in mind, how about we play a new game, okay? How about we play a game, or we have a system where children of all backgrounds receive exactly what they need to be successful. A system where children are met at their unique levels in an environment where all students belong and are invited to play. So how does this relate to the classroom, to schools, to instruction, and to literacy? As we grow and progress and learn more, our practices need to meet those needs to improve the education system. And there's some shifts that have to be made. We're learning that reading and learning to read is very hard. So students need explicit instruction on the skills that they need to be successful. Let me say that again. Learning to read is hard. Teaching children to read it can be hard, but children need explicit instruction to understand those skills that they need to be successful. So through studying the science of reading, we are finding practices and ways that we can approach literacy instruction and intervention that is driven by what students need. And with that, next slide, please. It is my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for this evening, Dr. Elsa Cardenas-Hagan. So a little bit about Dr. Cardenas-Hagan. She has been instrumental in the research regarding the science of reading and structural literacy as it relates to students of special populations, including emergent bilingual students and those emergent bilingual students who are dually identified. Dr. Cardenas Hagan is the president of Valley Speech Language and Learning Center, an associate professor at the University of Houston, and a researcher of evidence-based literacy foundations for English learners. Dr. Cardenas Hagan is also the author of Esperanza, Hope, a Spanish language program designed to assist students who struggle with learning to read, along with her latest book, which we're using in the DC public school system to guide our work, called The Literacy Foundations for English Learners. We are so excited to have Dr. Cardenas Hagan here today to share some of what she's found in the field. Following her presentation today, we'll open the floor or the chat box for questions surrounding the things that she's discussed. And with that, I'll pass the virtual mic over to Dr. Elisa Cardenas Hagan.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being here and for your interest in this topic that I've been talking about for decades. And I have a funny story to tell that one time I went with Suzanne Carricker to this conference and I said, this is going to be the best conference. It's going to be all university professors and, we're going to get out there. And we went to Colonial Williamsburg and we were there and we were looking and no one showed up to our presentation except for one person who was the moderator. And she felt so bad that she stayed and they answered questions. I'm like, oh gosh, I guess nobody was interested in our topic. And so, take that to all these years later, that, finally, I guess this has come to the forefront of that we need to do better. And as you said, Aisha, you were talking about equity and equality, and you added empowerment. And, I talk about literacy as that bridge to equity. And just a little bit about myself. I, am an English learner. And on a personal level, I was in elementary school when there was no law to protect for us to receive any kind of instruction in our native language. And we were actually punished for speaking our home language, and they would, spank us with these wooden paddles. And, that was just so traumatic and terrible. And, wonderful thing happens in middle school. You get to take foreign language in middle school. And that was, wow, I can take the Spanish language and I can show what I know. And I was so, I so wanted to know, I didn't fit anymore. And my mother is a Spaniard, my father is Mexican, and I didn't, I don't fit in either country. And I've been in both countries and studied in both countries. And, so it's always like, who are you? Where do you belong? And so it was that search of, I want to be an expert at this. So I took it all through elementary, all through middle school, high school, undergraduate, and graduate work. I went and studied in Spain. I came back with an accent that my father from Mexico just hated. And so then I went to study, and I studied linguistics, and it was all for a very personal reason. Today, that knowledge still services me. I mean, I use that knowledge and those experiences to do my work. But most of all, I think I have 4 L's for you today. The first one is my L to listen, my L to learn, the L to lead, to literacy for all. So listen and learn, and then we lead to teach that literacy for all students, including the students that Aisha was talking about, so that we have a better future. And these children, they're our future. And they are in our schools, and it's our job to understand what we should be doing. And I don't care that you don't speak their language, but you have a responsibility to understand how language develops across languages. You have a responsibility to understand how literacy develops. You have a responsibility to know something about their language and their culture, to make those connections. That's your duty. as an educator, as an interventionist, as a dyslexia therapist. That's your duty. That is the art of teaching, is really knowing and trying to learn. And we are lifelong learners. And I learn every day. I learn from you. I learn from the persons I get to work with every day, and I learn from the children that I still service. And so I do therapy on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Every day I see children. People cannot believe it. They're like, what in the world? You've got all these research studies going on. And I'm like, I will never stop seeing children because I learn from them. And I cannot tell you to be doing these things if I don't do it myself. I have to walk with you and be in your shoes. And in the clinic, I get the children that are the most challenging, the ones that nobody wants to take. And then when they start to behave or they get a little bit better and they make a little, okay, now we'll see them, right? But it's somewhere, some way that we have to make a connection. That's our job. And sometimes it's just little things. It's knowing more about them and what sets them off and what they like. And so bringing that into the work that we do. So I'll share my screen, and I want to begin with always, I've been afforded many opportunities, and I thank, so many different researchers. And this is the team that I've been able to work with across this country, my mentors, David Francis and Jack Fletcher, Sharon Bond. I've worked with each of them. And actually, Jack Fletcher, I knew even in the 80s when I was working in head trauma. I was director of head trauma rehabilitation in Houston, and Jack would do all of our neuropsychological evaluations. And then the other team members for all these years of these national projects that we have been afforded. So I've learned from them. I still learn from them, and we learn from each other, and we continue this work and try to meet all the challenges that we face each day to figure out some guidelines that can help you in your daily work as you are also challenged. So Aisha was so gracious to talk about the Literacy Foundations for English Learners. And what I really tried to do with this book, that, by the way, came out during COVID, but that was okay because it was a time where people could read and maybe have a little bit of time for reading because you weren't going to be going out and socializing very much on the weekends, right? So, but really, it was really meant to try to bring all that we know, the body of evidence, and talk about, what are those special features that we must think of as we work with these students from diverse populations who don't speak the same language of the instruction in the school, in their home. And so it's looking at those components of literacy. And by the way, literacy does include writing. And so, I probably won't have time to get much into that, but I want to tell you, I'm a speech and language pathologist. And so everything comes from the foundations of language for literacy. And that we also have to make sure that our work and what we do in dyslexia and dyslexia remediation and what we do in general education instruction really follows what we've learned through these years, and that we're also respectful. And when I say listen and learn, I mean listen and learn also from the people that maybe don't agree with everything and the work that we do, but we've got to come to some kind of consensus to move forward, because meanwhile, our students are behind. I've also written the Wells 3, which is really a way to make that transition from the native language of Spanish into the English language in a very systematic and explicit, cumulative manner, making connections across languages, but taking those components of phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, but also spelling and writing, so that students can make those connections. And the beautiful thing is, for example, the students that we serve, are Spanish speakers, and that's 80% of the population of English learners in the United States. Although we have 400 different languages spoken in the school districts, Arabic is the second most common language, with less than 3%, and after that is Vietnamese with about 2%. So no matter the language, I am going to talk a little bit, give you some little hints on Arabic and Vietnamese as the, second and third language, but my work is primarily, I will say up front, with Spanish speaking English learners. And, that's what I know very well. So as we think about this, it was such and just to kind of tell a story, that I started a foundation in the 90s called Brownsville Reads to really get everybody in the city to understand what these children needed. And I had a theory that when students are needing to learn another language, that it's helpful to have that home language for that second language. And that when we make these connections, that would be great. And when Dr. Reed Lyon from the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development came to Brownsville with Louisa Moats, all the teachers in the city were asking, thank you, Dr. Moats, and thank you, Dr. Reed Lyon, for your wonderful presentation. But what about the English learners? What about Spanish-speaking English learners? Dr. Reed Lyon went back to the United States Congress and asked for $30 million to begin the Biliteracy Research Network. And that's when we began, by the year 2000, this work on biliteracy, the Biliteracy Network. And now we're getting close to being spent $100 million on really trying to determine the best evidence-based practices that we know. You're all familiar with that report of the National Reading Panel that came out in the year 2000, but that only included monolingual English-speaking students, and that's where we got those 5 components of literacy. By the year 2006, after the Biliteracy Research Network began, we had enough information to then Diane August and Tim Shanahan were able to get a committee together, and the report of the National Literacy Panel on Language Minority Children and Youth was published. And this is where we can make a comparison, right? If you look on the left of your screen, you see the National Reading Panel summary for these key areas. And if you look on the right, what is it that we need to do that's adjusted for instruction to meet those needs? We know that using that native language and native language literacy knowledge for English literacy is an excellent evidence-based practice. Bringing into your instruction those cross-linguistic features is a resource. And the fact that students that have native language proficiency in literacy, they perform higher than those who were only instructed in English only. So what I want to tell you is there's no research that will tell you otherwise. It is very clear that when you have the opportunity to develop your native language and native language literacy, that is going to support second language literacy, and especially support it when you bring in these cross-linguistic features and you adjust the instruction to meet their language needs and as well as their literacy needs. So what are we finding? Right now we have a project called the Model Demonstration for Dyslexia. And what we're finding is that we have to strengthen the core instruction to be assured that when these students are being referred or identified, that indeed it's not because of dyslexia, or that it is because of dyslexia, not because of dysteachia, right? Not because, the instructor did not have the opportunity to have an excellent teacher preparation program that prepared them to meet the needs of these students. Now, I will tell you, as we look at this population of students that continues to increase, we only have 3% of educators who have specialization in working with these students, right? So we really need to expand that so that there's more instructors available. We need the human capital available to help really understand what we should be doing. So if we look in those elementary years, we really do see that screening can help us find those risk factors that we can then get these students in intense small group reading interventions, because obviously if the earlier we start, the better, and we can actually prevent some of these issues. And so that early intervention is just so necessary. So that's one IES practice guide. Our research is also featured in this IES practice and I'm only showing you the strong recommendations. So when you see these practice guides, they'll have 5 recommendations, and typically about 3 of them will have, some of them will have very strong recommendations, other moderate, and they'll show you which ones have minimal evidence. And just because it has minimal evidence doesn't mean like it's a practice that you shouldn't do. It's just that we don't have a large body of evidence. And some of it might be because you shouldn't be doing that. But in teaching academic content and literacy to English learners, we know that these students will lag behind in their vocabulary. So when you're working in the area of dyslexia, what will be so challenging will be that oftentimes we expect these students to have excellent oral language skills. Well, there's other factors. I'm learning English as my second language. So where am I in my language development and my proficiency level, and my opportunity for that? And so, vocabulary more than likely will be affected and may not be at the same level that you would anticipate of a monolingual, and that's to be understood, right? But at some point, as we look at their peers, are they not developing that language and vocabulary as they should? The other thing is that we need for there to be a better integration of, this oracy with literacy and oral and written instruction, and also into that content area, and all across the day. And what we're finding right now in the schools and school districts that we work in for our research studies is we're finding that somehow, and I don't know if it's because we, describe the components of literacy and components of language, that everyone thinks, okay, this is my phonological awareness time. This is my phonics time. This is my reading fluency time. This is my spelling time. And I don't have time for writing. So we're going to do writing after school. But instead, listening, speaking, and reading and writing, right? That's what we want to see. And, listening and speaking, that's my oral language, and my written language is reading and writing. That's when it involves print. And we've got to do a better job of coordinating that, and really making sure that we're addressing it. And a lot of times, everyone wants programs. But what we need are highly knowledgeable instructors, interventionists, educators to work with these students. By the year 2017, another consensus study report promoting the educational success of children and youth learning English, promising futures. And once again, after the meta-analysis, what are the ideas behind there? That developing literacy amongst these English learners, you have to be explicit and systematic. And those literacy components include phoneme awareness, phonics, oral reading fluency, vocabulary, reading comprehension, and writing. There it is. And the multilingual community has been very upset, thinking that, when we implement our structured literacy approaches, that we're not including writing. Absolutely. Writing is a part of literacy, and absolutely we want to promote that. But we need to do so in an explicit manner, not implicit. And that's been an issue oftentimes in our core instruction in these early years, that it's been implicit and not explicit. And that we are language teachers. We are language teachers, and we are literacy teachers throughout the day, throughout those content areas. And when we're working with English learners, we must understand their level, their oral language proficiency level, and provide them with visuals and with the verbal support that will meet them at their point of need. Are they beginners at the beginning stages of this second language acquisition, or are they at the intermediate, or now at the advanced? And the more opportunities that you give me to work amongst my peers in these little groups, the more willing I am to take the risks in language and in literacy. So let's also be great teachers, great interventionists and instructors, and capitalize upon these students, their language, their culture, their background. I'm not saying when you're culturally responsive that that's going to teach you to read, but what I'm saying is what we know about that cultural responsiveness is that we know it engages student, it motivates them. So I've got a student that will be very engaged and motivated when they can see themselves in the materials that I use, in the topics that I discuss, in the books that I read to them, and in the work that we do. It is necessary to screen for language and literacy challenges. So I do promote universal screening. We've been doing this work since the 90s. We don't have over-identification. And why do we do this? To find those risk factors early and to prevent future problems. And we're hoping to find these issues well before the 3rd grade, right? And when we find those risk factors, let's do something about it right away and have that targeted instruction, that targeted intervention in those small groups. And when I say small groups, it would be no more than 5 students. If you have more than 5 students, it no longer is a small group. We also want to use assessment tools and practices, and the gold standard for assessment, even in this promoting the educational success of children and youth learning English, will tell you that really we need to have all kinds of stakeholders involved, but we have to understand the tools that we're using, how to interpret those tools and assessments, and that we consider that language of instruction as we consider that language proficiency level and the languages in which we will test, whether that be 1 language or 2 languages, and whether we look at that, across languages, very important. So if I find a weakness in 1 language, then I'm going to very definitely make sure that, well, is that weakness because of opportunity, or that weakness is despite opportunity? Heyman Yan and colleagues have 7 factors that might influence English learners' language and academic development that we should be considering. And that's that learning environment. Has there been consistent education? Has that language of instruction model been followed? Or has there been a lot of changes? And I'm going to tell you, sometimes we don't have very much consistency in our schools. And we've been in some schools where they change the language of instruction model to immersion, or to late exit or early exit, or dual language, 1-way, 2-way, all these different programs. And what we know is when you shift and change the language of instruction model, that sets children back. We do know that. So we've got to monitor what we're doing. We have to make the best decisions for these students right from the very beginning of their academic career. We also know that these instructional factors, do we have well-prepared instructors that have, and also in that National Literacy Panel report for language minority children and youth, it very clearly said we don't have the professionals. We need further professional development to make sure that we're considering all these factors that must be in place as we work with students who are English learners. We know that as we look at this population, oftentimes there's family factors. So did they come from a single home? Do their caregivers or family members speak the home language and English, or only their home language? What kind of outside opportunities do they have for language development and literacy development? What about, when you're new and coming to this country, all that you've been through? So there's lots of physical and psychological factors. Did they have schooling in their home country? And what are those factors? Did they go to early childhood? Did they have preschool? Did they have kindergarten? Was that school provided in a consistent manner? And then the cross-cultural factors that, I may not speak the language, but there's different rules about how language is used, different features of culture that I may not be aware of, but I need to learn and investigate and find out from the wonderful caregivers that they have or other community members. That's my duty. We have just finished up this project for the U.S. Department of Education called the Model Demonstration Projects for English Learners. And in this, we have literacy briefs that talk about this high quality differentiated language and literacy teaching and how to scaffold for students' linguistic and academic needs, how we should be thinking about those culturally relevant principles and the opportunities to practice in those language domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing, using Language One supports and that educator knowledge of something about their students' home language and culture. So if you go to MTSS4Ls, you'll also find in our literacy briefs a new framework for a multi-tiered system of support, which typically is at 3 levels, tier 1 being that general education level, tier 2, that small group instructions, tier 3, that very intense work, more than 45 minutes a day, often provided by a special educator, or sometimes it's even provided by a specialist within that general education model. But if you look there, what looks different is that as we work across the tiers of instruction, you're seeing that language proficiency level and thinking about, all right, are they at a basic level, intermediate level, or advanced level? And what about those culturally and linguistic responsive teaching practices to get our students motivated and engaged? We also have on this multi-tiered systems of support a rubric for you and your leaders and some action plans and scoring worksheets on how you're doing in that implementation. We do not have the answers on the implementation sciences for multi-tiered systems of support at this point in time. We need better implementation. And so this rubric is really designed to look at the different levels of instruction and a self-reflection where you can decide, are you a 1, a 3, or a 5 in your implementation of this multi-tiered system support. We also cover screening and assessment as well as instruction. And so that would be a very useful tool to self-reflect. At the IDA, when you think about dyslexia, you're thinking of, it is a specific learning disability that the students have these difficulties in accurate or fluent word recognition, and they end up, not being able to decode very well or spell very well. And that's all as a result of, this phonological component problem, right? And we say it's unexpected on what, after being provided with, some great instruction, effective instruction, and they have, the cognitive capabilities. And so if I can't decode and read the words, then certainly the secondary consequences are going to be that I'm going to have some issues eventually with vocabulary and reading comprehension. But when we look, what's different for a student, for example, in the Spanish language, and what's different for them is that because of languages, for example, that are transparent, like the Spanish language, you might see more the issue of fluency and spelling instead of the issue of decoding, right? Or that phonological component, because of the nature of fewer sounds than the English language that exists. English has more sounds than most languages. And also English has more patterns that don't quite follow the typical pattern. So there's like, about 15% unpredictable for English, 85% predictable. But in a language like Spanish, vowel sounds never change, the letters and sounds match on. But what we see in the dyslexia profiles for these students are in these transparent languages that you might need to look further at fluency and spelling. And oftentimes it seems like their decoding can be within normal limits. So that's like a little warning sign to you. And then also those considerations for the oral language proficiency and the considerations about their opportunity and their socioeconomic levels. And as we look at those secondary characteristics, are those because of the reduced experiences or despite those experiences, right? And so should we collect more data? Should we follow them more closely? Decisions need to be made in a multidisciplinary team approach, but we should know that for these transparent languages such as Spanish, dyslexia may still exist, but you might see it more in their native language. For example, Spanish more in the areas of fluency and spelling. If they have these issues of phonological awareness and phonics, it's actually a more probably more pronounced problem. So what are we going to do with these students? We're going to take our instruction and intervention from the premise of language. And so you must be developing and working with their language and their language skills as you're working on developing their literacy skills. And language supports literacy, and literacy supports language. So the more language I have, that's going to help me with my literacy skills. And as I read more and write more, that's going to help my language. So it's a bi-directional kind of language supporting literacy and literacy supporting language. And when we look at Bloom and Leahy, their definition of language and describing it with these components, that all languages have sounds, the phonology, but that means processing these new sounds and producing them with precision, because how I listen and process the sounds and produce the sounds, that's going to be how I read and write and spell them, right? So we've got to make sure that we've got that precision there. Semantics, that opportunity to understand words and use words. Morphology, we're going to talk more about that, because what we find is if we think about those smaller meaning units within words, we use that for decoding and spelling, and that can very much help our vocabulary and comprehension, and especially in languages that have so much in common with the English language. And syntax matters. The more I know not only the words and what those words mean and how to figure out the meanings of those words, but it's also understanding how words work to create a cohesive sentence and then cohesive paragraphs, right? And I have to understand those similarities and differences and how they're used across languages. And look at this word, pragmatics. It's all, as a speech and language pathologist, this covers all about the use of language. And so as I think about students from different languages and different cultures, that means, oh, well, let me see. Do they look at you in their culture? How do they initiate a conversation? How do they shift the conversation? How do they take turns? How do they maintain that topic? How do they use sayings and idioms in their languages, right? I'm always trying to learn idioms in the English language because I think I'm fascinated by them. And, I consider myself an advanced English speaker, but still I learn from you as we go through these experiences about the different idioms and sayings. And it's fascinating to me how they came about and what they mean. And we do take this from the component of the simple view of reading, where we're going to look at, foundational skills, making sure that they can decode, but all the while making sure they have enough comprehension to get to that skilled reading. And Hollis Scarborough, you all are very familiar with that, making sure those foundational skills are automatic, but also she explained in greater detail those language comprehension skills of expanding that background knowledge and world knowledge, really providing the opportunities to develop vocabulary, understanding how the text works and that text structure, so that our students can become increasingly strategic to get to that fluid reading. So structured literacy, and when the International Dyslexia Association in June of 2014 really came up with the term, and why did we come up with this term? Because we needed to describe this comprehensive approach, and we needed to dispel the myths that we were only about phonological awareness and phonics. And I'm still trying to break through those myths as I work with our multilingual community to make them understand that no, we are working from the perspective of language and how it relates to literacy, and we're addressing language as we address literacy. We need to do a better job. And so in June of 2014, this term was adopted, structured literacy, to really talk about, it's that sound system and how that sound system is translated to that print and how that print works, right? For working in, creating these sentences, but all the while gathering meaning and understanding that I am not only I'm doing listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So I need to know about the organization of spoken and written discourse, right? And the other aspects, we can't forget the other aspects. You know it as you work with these students. You know that many of them don't have the attention skills that they need, or they need to have the working memory to hold the information and manipulate it and come up with a product so that they can get to that reading comprehension or that writing composition. But what I say for structured biliteracy is not only knowing that one speech sound system, it's knowing it in minimally 2 languages or more. It's knowing the writing system in 2 or more languages, that orthography, the structure of sentences in 2 or more languages, those meaningful word parts in 2 or more languages, the meaning in 2 languages, the semantics, but also thinking about that oral language, that written language, that discourse for deep reading, effective written communication. But I'm going to be using those culturally and linguistically responsive practices and thinking about those aspects of cognition that are very related, especially as we work with students with dyslexia in their journey towards advanced literacy. So as you look here on the left, this is, and I want to tell you, these studies were replicated and done over 10 years of work and different cohorts of students. And we did these studies under the direction like Sharon Vaughn, Tricia Mathis, Sylvia Lennon Thompson, Paul Serino, Colleen Carlson, Cheryl and Paula Duradola, myself, David Francis. But if you look here, those IES practice guides, they include this work. And what we can find is early interventions for these Spanish-speaking students that are at risk for reading difficulties and reading English. We can find that we can have these statistically significant results, and that we not only worked on those components of literacy, but we had additional features for oral language proficiency and the scaffolds for English language skills, right? So we would prepare the students for challenging, words that would come up as they had to listen to directions or they had to read and learn. Linnea Airy and her group also found their work with language minority students, they had statistically significant results. But how did they get those results? Not only teaching those foundational skills, but applying and having the students learn vocabulary and apply meaning to the words as they read. And those visual supports were also provided. So as we, and if you look on the left, so these were the studies. That was just one of the studies. I mean, these students were followed up in 1st grade and 2nd grade and 3rd grade and 4th grade. And these, the significance of their, when we worked early with them, it was fantastic because, that intervention made such a difference in their progress across the years when compared to those that had a different form of intervention and opportunity. But if you look there, early interventions for Spanish-speaking students at risk for reading in English. While those studies were going on for those 10 years, we were also doing the early interventions for Spanish-speaking students in Spanish, so that they were parallel, but they were specific to the language structure of Spanish. So what should you do? What did those literacy supports look like? Well, we made sure that in the literacy support activity, we had opportunities for students to understand, right, words and concepts that we were going to be teaching, as well as use them. So we addressed both receptive and expressive language skills, right? And as we were going through the lessons, we had very targeted opportunities for oral language, but we also selected vocabulary. And what I want to tell you is oftentimes we select academic words Isabel Beck talks about those tier 2 words, academic words with high utility. But we also found that we had to address tier 1 words because in English, many tier 1 words have multiple meanings. So a simple word like run, I could come up with 45 definitions of that word. And so they may only know that, 1 or 2 definitions. And so it's really, as Isabel Beck talks about, the depth and breadth of words. So this is vital as you work with your students. This is what you should be doing as you work with students who do not speak English as their first language. That if you're going to be effective, you've got to bring in those opportunities for receptive and expressive language, to work on those vocabularies and really maximize instruction by doing so. So let's take a look at what one of the first things you should be doing. So as you begin to work with a student, you should take a quick look at, all right, what letters and sounds do they know, or what letters and sounds are familiar across the languages, or what sounds do they have in their language that we also have in the English language. So here's just some examples of Spanish and English, right? So in Spanish and English, we have that letter B and it says B. We have that letter C and it says K, and it also makes the soft sound, right? After E or I, it says in English after E, I, or Y. So we have that sound D and F and G and K and U and N and P and S. So I could collect about 19 examples of direct transfers between Spanish and English, and another 9 that are almost transfers, meaning that I have that letter, but the sound is a little bit different, right? So the sound changed, but the letter exists. So that's about 28 reading concepts that already, if they have native language literacy, don't go back and teach them. This is the letter B and it's a bat, when they already know in their language, be, bate, b, right? So that's what's important, not treating them as if they bring nothing. We have to take it from an asset point of view. Same thing with Arabic and English. So in Arabic, these sounds exist. B, d, f, o, right? J, r, w, y, z, sh. Amazing. Let's look at Vietnamese in English. Notice some of the similar sounds. B, d, f, o, Now, if you look here, they even have in Vietnamese the sound right? Which that oftentimes doesn't exist in a lot of other languages. But what's going to be challenging for them? What do you need to focus on? You need to focus on challenging sounds like those short vowel sounds, or sounds like z and those vowel R's are all. But let's make some approximations. This is what you can do. So if you have a Spanish speaking English learner, the letter J is very challenging for most students, especially these English learners. But what you can do is you can capitalize upon, right, that sound in Spanish that they have, ch, right? I can help them learn this new sound of English, j, if I just teach them that it's a very similar sound, ch, because the only difference between ch and j is that my voice box is on for j and it's off for ch. They can actually feel those differences. Spanish letter D. The Spanish letter D, if it occurs in the middle of a word, and I show the example of the word finger, which is spelled D-E-D-O, and it's pronounced, look at me, dedo. Although I had 2 D's in there, the first D made a different sound, d, de, than the second D. The second D was actually the English digraph TH sound voiced. Dedo, ruido, cuidado. So in English, when they learn words like father, and they're writing it F-A-D-E-R, I say, good for you. You know the sound. It's in Spanish, you use D, but in English, we use TH. That's a connection to be made. In Spanish, we have the vowel U that says oo. So that's exactly the sound for digraph OO in English, the long sound. Moon, boot. They might write boot, B-U-T. And I tell them, good for you. You got the sound for boot. But the letter U is what we would use in Spanish, but in English, it's OO. We have that Spanish trilled R. So it's going to be, I might want to say rose instead of rose, right? But we also have an R, that's the soft R. So the word for face in Spanish is spelled C-A-R-A, and we pronounce it cara. The word for hour is H-O-R-A, hora, cara, hora. Now say these words to yourself: ladder, bottle, little, Katie, petty. That middle sound, your tongue was going up and down. Petty, Ketty, little, bottle, ladder. That is a flap sound. And in Spanish, we use the letter R as a flap. In English, it's T and D when it's between two vowels in that medial position. So when they write the word ladder, L-A-R-E-R, I say, good for you. You know the sound. It's the sound, right? That like that medial D, ladder. But in English, we use that double D. In Spanish, we use R. Connections. The Arabic language doesn't have the sound, but Arabic does have the sound B. So when we're teaching the English sound to speaker of Arabic, then we need to just make those voiceless pairs. B, turn off your voice. Arabic does not have the sound, right? But the sound for the letter F does exist. Once again, voiceless, right? And then there's no initial S consonant blends in Arabic or in Spanish. So I teach my students to show me your teeth, Spanish, spaghetti. So show me your teeth. Don't add the extra vowel like you do in Arabic and in Spanish. In Vietnamese, the languages are mostly one or two syllable words, and those English words with more than one or two syllables are very challenging. Those English consonant clusters are challenging for Vietnamese speakers. The new sounds, such as that sound of ch, is very challenging, right? Or sh. So if they have the sound sh and the sound z, right? Can I tell them to say shh and then cut it short? Shh, shh, shh. And I have them start going shh, shh. The same thing for that. Those are harder to do, but I can make that work to get them to the targeted sounds. So as you're trying to figure out, all right, do I know what sounds are new for them? And there is a website called mylanguages.org that will really address, I think more than, close to 100 languages or so. And it'll tell you which sounds from these native languages that you service are linked to English sounds. And when students have these capabilities of phonological awareness in their native language, it's very linked to the second language of English. And so the Spanish and English link is 0.92. So I am 0.08 from it being a perfect correlation. And perhaps that 0.08 includes those sounds that do not transfer. Spanish language has about 22 sounds. The English language has 44. So I've got to learn 22 new sounds. So let's focus on those new sounds, like that challenging sound J. So as I design my phonological awareness, if they already have it in their native language, one of the things I can do in English is focus on the new sounds. And then I can focus on vocabulary and the meanings and then connect it to the letters. So here's some examples. I have them say the word ham, change to J. What's the word? Jam. Say the word bat, change B to J. What's the word? Jet. Say the word pig, change P to J. The word is jig. Say the word hog, change to J, jog. So they might not know the meanings of these words, but I was targeting that sound J. So then I could subsequently show them, oh, look, here's a picture of jam. It's strawberry. You can put it on your bread. It's a sweet taste. It has a sweet taste, right? And this is a jet, another word for an airplane. Here's the jig, right? When we go fishing, or we can go for a jog. It's running at a steady and slow pace. But now we want to link. So I've got my phonological awareness. What am I doing? I'm targeting the new sounds. I'm adding in the vocabulary. I'm adding in those visuals to help these English learners. And as I do that, right, I've got them processing, I've got them producing, I've got them doing phonological awareness. I'm going to link it to my letters. So say these words after me: jam, jog, jet. What did you hear at the beginning? J. Let me show you the letter. It's J. That's a jaguar. Oh, do you have that word in your language? What is it in your home language? Jaguar. Oh, how do you pronounce the first sound? Oh, it's in English, it's jaguar. Very good, very good. Can you tell me that word jaguar in English? Jaguar. Very good. Now, let me see if you can use it in a sentence. It's an animal. Create a sentence with the word jaguar. The jaguar is an animal. What can that animal do? It can run fast. Say the letter name with me. J. What's my sound? J. And my keyword to unlock it? Jaguar. J. Now we're going to practice writing, and then we're also going to practice reading some words with this letter J. So I brought in this new sound. I brought in the phonological awareness. I brought in that letter sound correlation. Now we're going to practice and learn about the structure of English. And English has these different types of syllables. And guess what? I have the same kind of words that look similar. Like here's English 10, and in Spanish I have ten. They look similar, but they have different meanings. Here's no, no. In English, it's dame. In Spanish, dame. So I'm going to have trouble with these vowel pairs. In English, you say pie. In Spanish, I say pie. Vowel R's, right? Mar, mar. Final stable syllables, cable, cable. So what's going to happen here, I can make the connection showing them, the vowel sounds never change in Spanish. So you don't have to learn these ways of looking at the syllables because they never change. The only reason we look at this is to know, when do I say the short vowel? Right? When do I say the long vowel? Oh, like a no. Well, when it ends in a vowel, you're going to say that long sound. When it has a consonant after that vowel, at least one consonant after the vowel, it'll be the short. But we have the pattern of vowel consonant E, but the E is silent. That's hard for me because in our language, we don't have final E is silent. All vowels are produced, right? The vowel pair, we know that we have to teach each one. In the Spanish language, I have this vowel pair, but it makes another sound. And by the way, it means something different. Pie is a dessert, but in Spanish, pie is my foot. Vowel R, right? Those are challenging because we would roll those R's and we count it as two different sounds. Mar. And in English, we don't. R, we count it as one. The final stable syllables can be challenging because we don't pronounce the E at the end, and we do in Spanish. So now let's take a look. I showed you, we did phonological awareness. I showed you the letters and its sound. And now I've showed you closed syllables. Now we can practice some words. And sometimes, the multilingual community will say, this is terrible. This is a terrible example. They have no connection to be made. But what I'm really focused on here is trying to see, can they read words with closed syllables? And then I'm going to work on sentences, and I'm going to work on paragraphs. But first, I just want to give them a practice to apply what they've just learned. And they've learned that when there's a vowel and there at least one consonant after it, it's going to be that short vowel sound. So I have them prepare it. If they want to code those vowels, they can, that it's going to make the short sound. And then they read jam, jet, jig, jab, jan. We can practice reading and do repeated readings, jam, jet, jig, jab, jan. Very good. But now, students, we're going to take this from the language perspective. Look at these words that you just read to me. Which words not only have that sound j, but they have that short vowel sound in English, ah. Can you read those words to me? Jam, jab, jan. Good job. So I address the sound features. Let's prepare the next row. You can code it if you need to. Jim, job, Jack, Jen, just. Let's read it. Jim, job, Jack, Jen, just. Very good. Now, if you look at these words, which words here are persons' names? Getting at vocabulary, Jim, Jack, Jen. How did you know that? Had capital letters. Which ones is someone's work? Job. Very good. Look at the next row. Prepare it. Code those files if you need to. Let's see if you can read these words with some accuracy. Jet, jig, jan, jack, jam. Let's practice reading them with more automaticity. Jet, jig, jan, jack, jam. Now, students, let's look at this word. Which word can be a noun, a verb, and an adjective? Let's see if you know all these meanings of the words and how you can use them. The word is jet. Good job. If I use it as a noun, a person, place, or thing, it would be that airplane, the jet that can fly in the sky. Or when we finish our class today, we're going to jet out of here. We're going to leave quickly. Or I have an inkjet printer. It acts as an adjective there. So jet can be a noun, a verb, and it can function as a noun, a verb, or an adjective here. For pragmatics, I would do the same routine, having them read, and then I would ask them, okay, let's see, the saying that says, I was only kidding, that means I was what? Just kidding. If I'm going to really listen to that music with my friends, we're going to jam to the music. So there's different ways in which we can use those words. And this, what I'm demonstrating to you, is taking a boring decoding practice, right? Having the students read for the accuracy, develop that fluency and that automaticity. But I brought in the components of language to really deepen their understanding of the words that they're reading, which the English learners will need. And then I can use my visual supports of the strawberry jam, jam to the music. Oh, I can be in a traffic jam. And then there's that jet as a noun, jetting out of somewhere as a verb, and that inkjet printer as the adjective. So I've done phonological awareness and phonics, right? And now I want to get at fluency. Now, one of the things that you have to know about fluency is when we think about fluency for English learners, we have to not only think about that ability, to read with expression, right? That accuracy, that prosody, but also their oral language proficiency, because that reading fluency and comprehension is moderated by oral language proficiency on English learners. And some of the ways I might work on that, the English learner needs a lot of work on phrasing, that intonation. Those are what I would consider super segmental features of the language. And so I might use these pencil swings. Jim makes rings for his job. Oh, can you emphasize Jim more here? The noun, Jim makes rings for his job. For the verb, Jim makes rings for his job. And just showing how when we change the emphasis, it just kind of changes the a little bit on that meaning here. The rings are for men and women. So here they learned the letter. Why did I have this? Well, they had learned the letter J, they had learned the R. We've been talking of people work. They learned NG. And they had learned Z and R. And we were trying to put together. We have a theme for the week, and the theme are occupations. So we've learned that J. We've learned these syllable patterns, and now we're practicing reading, working on phrasing, and then later we're going to be working on some comprehension. And that also, the multilingual community isn't real happy about seeing this kind of work, but we have to do this kind of work. I know that we want to get students to reading beautiful, authentic literature for enjoyment and for learning across the content areas, but they're not at that point yet. And so that's why I bring in beautiful read alouds, right? And to supplement and explore that background knowledge, that vocabulary, and that culture even more, because I've got to get to this point where they're able to read connected text that is decodable for them. And all the while I've been talking to you about, yes, I'm working on oral language. I'm working on oral language. So I had a theme, and my theme was occupations. And I start with cognates in my occupations. Can we name occupations? Let's brainstorm the occupations. Let's see which ones are cognates, words that are similar in spelling and meaning. Like artist is artista, pianist, pianista, therapist, terapista, doctor. And let's bring in not only these words that are similar, right, in across languages and their spelling and their meaning, right? But also, let's bring in the visuals and let's have discussions around these different kinds of occupations. And let's look at the similarities and the differences across the words. We can look at the phonological features, like if someone's an author in Spanish, what's your word? Autor. How many syllables are in that Spanish word? Autor. You open your mouth twice, it's 2 syllables. How about in English? Author, 2 syllables as well. How many sounds in Spanish? Out, or. It's 4 sounds, and in English, it's only 3. I had talked to you about that ORAR, that in Spanish it's 2 sounds. How many meaning units? If I said authors, that would be more than 1. So it would have 2 meaning units, but if I just have author, it's only 1 meaning unit. How are they the same? How's an author the same or different from an architect? Is the word a noun? Can it be used as a verb? Like he's the author, or has authored a book, right? So maybe it can be as a verb. How are they the same in spelling? How are they different in spelling? So what did I do right now? I approached the phonology, the sounds. I did some phonological awareness by asking you to tell me the sounds and the syllables. I looked at the meaning of the word. We talked about the meaning. We talked about the morphemes, right? We talked about the syntax, and we had you use it in a sentence. And I actually connected it to spelling. So I went through phonology, semantics, morphology, syntax, pragmatics, and spelling, orthography. Same thing with the sample lesson that I can do here. I can do the very same thing with working on morphemes. And what I want to tell you about this is 60% of the English language comes from Latin, and oftentimes these morphemes also end up being cognates. The 2 best word learning strategies for English learners are cognate awareness and morphological awareness. And I can use the same procedure that I use for my cognates. I can use it for my morphemes, right? And then to end today, I'd like to talk to you about 3PV, 3RQ. And this is, I write about this in a book called Multisensory Teaching of Basic Language Skills. And what it is putting together the 8 best evidence practices that we know of, right, from the National Literacy Panel report, and putting it together in I do this to help my lesson planning. I'm going to start with my purpose. I'm going to prepare a connection to explore that background knowledge. We're going to make a prediction. Have the students make a prediction, see if the prediction comes true. We're going to work on the vocabulary and prepare them for words that could be challenging. They're going to read, but they're not going to read once. They'll read to build fluency and comprehension. We do a thorough review of what they've read. I don't leave out the retell. In one of our studies, we left out the retell, and that was a mistake. The retell solidifies that comprehension. And then we're going to question answer and question generate. The students have to generate questions. And so I can take this very simple passage. All right, let's look at this passage. Can you predict? It says artisans. What does it have in the front? Art and an, artisan. Oh, and it has S, more than one. So artisans. Oh, it has art in it. What do you think that means? What could the passage be about? So hopefully we can talk about art. Oh, do you know this word in your language? Artesanos. Oh, there's art and an and the suffix ano and its suffix s. So let's talk about the different forms of art. Can you tell me something that would be considered art? Then I bring in my visuals if we have this discussion of an artist, or somebody that can create a sculpture, ceramics, or the guitarist, or a singer, or an actor. The word in the passage that's going to appear that you need to know is content. And in Spanish, what would that be? Contento. That would mean happy or satisfied. But if I say contents, right? What are the contents? That would be your things or belongings, Spanish contenidos, right? But in this passage, it's going to be happy and satisfied. So I want you to put your hand under your saying and say content. You're going to put the accent on the second syllable so your mouth opens wider. Content. Don't say content, because that means something different. In our passage, it's going to mean happy and satisfied. And so our students who are English learners will need that specific kind of help on the pronunciation, the accent pattern, the meaning, and the attachment and connection to their native language. So I can do this very same activity, right, where we're going to be talking about artisans. We're going to be talking about these occupations, and then I'm going to have the comprehension questions. But then I'm also going to ask them to create a question, right? So I review with them, we retell, and then we ask questions. I'm sorry I'm having to rush through this, but I want to leave some time for questions. During our interventions, we always use read alouds because our English learners really need to explore their world knowledge, get to listen to wonderful books that are related to their cultures, related to many cultures, and also give them the opportunity to really use their language skills through questioning, through discussion. And we also use some books where they were existed across the languages, so that if they were having trouble with that understanding, we could also have those books available in their home languages. But these read alouds can incorporate various cultures, expand that world knowledge, can guide our students for listening and for having those wonderful opportunities to speak and discuss, and take them to listening and to texts that are beyond their current ability for reading. And then I do want to tell you that we do work on writing. We will work on foundational skills of writing, which will mean that I have to know how words work, and I need to know how to create different types of sentences and connect those sentences, but also going through that process for composition. And oftentimes we're not seeing writing instruction in the classrooms or in interventions. And, writing can support reading, and reading can support writing. So that's something that we want to add. So we want you to be knowledgeable in these students' abilities, what they know, what they don't know, capitalizing on their native language knowledge for that second language knowledge, and always considering how you can bring in their language and their culture, but being explicit and systematic in your approach. And so I've talked about some resources. You talked about the book, but I talked about MTSS for L's. At Colorin, Colorado, we call it Colorin, Colorado. We have resources that are for teaching English learners, and some video clips and things in there. I have one on the assessment on there that was done a long time ago, but still valid today. And then some things for parents. At the Meadow Centers, there's a lot of like 10 key ideas, top 10 things. At Dyslexia IDA, you must know about the fact sheets. I told you about the Center for English Learners. And here's some references. And as I said, literacy is that bridge to equity, and we need you to be prepared to teach every student, including these students who don't speak English as their first language. And we do want literacy for all. So thank you so much. And now I'll open it up, I guess, for questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cardenas Hagan. We have definitely got some gems from you tonight. Definitely been taking notes, and we have a lot of questions coming in. For the sake of time, we probably won't have time to go through all of the questions, but I just wanted to share some of the ones that came in. The first question is from one of our DCPS Structured Literacy Fellows. And these are a group of educators in DCPS who are reading your book and using the book to guide our work that we're doing within the ESL department. The question is, how can I design a high school class to address SLIFE students? So this is students who have interrupted education for people in the room, students' literacy needs, and which resources, either online or paper, would you recommend to support those students?
So I think the first thing, so you have high school students, and I think the first thing is really understanding, where are they in their, so are you familiar with their language proficiency level? Are they at basic or intermediate or at advanced? And are you familiar with where they are in that continuum of language, of literacy? So are they at the beginning stages of literacy and need to learn these foundational skills, or are they at the point where, oh, I can decode anything, but I don't have the comprehension that I need, right? And so what I think I provide in the book is really looking at foundational skills and giving you some frameworks and templates to work to help those foundational skills of literacy. But I also have in the book of how you work on vocabulary and comprehension, and also how you work on writing and extending language in a systematic way. So I have these kind of like, and I forget what chapter they're in. I guess I could get the book out, but really explaining about, well, this is all I'm getting them. Um, this is all I'm getting from them in regards to their oral language. How do I extend that in a systematic way? And in there, I show how the student only gave me like a noun and a verb, and how did I have them add an adjective or an article and prepositional phrase, and how by the time they see my cues, by the time they see my system and my cues, they have a complex sentence. And so I think those are ways in which you could help develop their language skills. But it's really knowing, what are they needing? Are they needing decoding skills? Are they needing comprehension skills? Or are they needing both? And where are they in their language proficiency? Where and depending where they are in their language proficiency, as I'm instructing reading, then I have to modify that to meet them at their point of that oral language proficiency level.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we've gotten a lot of questions about students with interrupted education and who are developing their literacy, their L1 skills. So all those suggestions
So,
will be taken.
right. And so, if I don't if I, like, let's say they're not reading, if I don't address that, then it's just a Band-Aid. When can is there time in the day? Is there opportunity for intervention to work with them to where they can get those foundational skills? Or as if it's comprehension, then as I'm working, can I be systematic in that approach? And what I was trying to show was that if I have something, for example, in a content area that I'm studying, then like on Mondays, I introduce that topic. We're going to introduce the vocabulary. We're going to see if there's any cognates. We're going to work on naming and describing, and I'm going to use this. We also added, for example, in middle school we did, and right now with the C-cell project, it's looking at doing this work in social studies and science in middle school and high school, but trying to bring literacy into it for English learners and the long-term English learners, which we need to know more about. But it's really trying to be, bringing in language and literacy as we work in these classrooms in science and social studies in middle school and high school, and trying to do and teach teachers how you do that work with the textbooks that you have. So we're responsible for teaching them the content, but how can we scaffold for that language? So I would, if you would go to C-Cell Center, this project just started. So ccellcenter.org, CSEL center.org. And on there you can see some webinars, and as the project moves through, you'll get more information, especially on adolescent English learners, which I think you're talking about today.
Uh, Dr. Katie is saying that was just wonderful. I just, in the interest of time, we seem to have lost Aisha. Not sure
Oh,
she.
okay.
I'm sure she'll come right back, but we have some really wonderful questions. One more in the Q&A for you, and very much aligned with the question you just heard. But would you vary any of your recommendations or offer different resources for older newcomers, that is upper elementary, with no or very little schooling in their home language?
Yeah. So what I think I would try to do, I mean, if you're an interventionist, what I think I would try to do very much is I would, as we're trying to work, because they're having to learn content as they're learning language, right? And the teachers that work with them are responsible for teaching them that content. So if you read that IES practice guide, it's like teaching a set of vocabulary words across, like at least a week of study. And so if you could get some of what they're having to learn in their core classroom, right? What we did is we actually added also read alouds to go with that, but also looked at the type of text and vocabulary they were doing. And we were trying to look for any opportunities for cognates in there, any opportunities for morphemes in there to help them get to that comprehension. What kind of sentence structures are in there that they would need to know how this works? Do I need to go back and teach, some of these, parts of speech so that they can get at those complex sentences? So I think, whenever we can connect to what they're going to be responsible for learning, I think that's wonderful, because then you're at a level of, okay, they're smart, right? But I've just got to make it comprehensible. And what I say always is that let's develop, and I work with teachers to develop a language goal and a literacy goal as we're teaching the content areas. And let's look at the opportunities for the vocabulary and what they're supposed to learn. And then let's do those kinds of activities that I was describing to you of any cognates here. Can I bring in any morphemes here? Can I have them describe? Can I have them and I use those visuals, and can I give them the verbal supports? Can we extend it into, using it in a sentence and writing it, that kind of thing. So I think the procedure and the process is there. It's the materials that, and I would like for you to try and use the materials of information that they're supposed to be learning. That would be excellent. But if they don't have foundational skills, you have to go back and teach that too. So anyway, I don't know if that answered the question,
I think it was a
but we
great
don't,
answer.
and I
It
want
was,
to, and I want to say, we don't have all the answers for
yeah.
long-term Ls or adolescent Ls. We're still working on that, but I want to explain to you the work that has been done and the work that is currently being scaled up. And you can keep in touch with that work if you keep in touch with the ccellcenter.org.
This is great. We have a bunch of other questions. Maybe I'll ask you just quickly what you would say to parents who are trying to support biliteral literacy development.
Yeah. And so if you look at that MTSS for Ls, um, we have a brochure in there of how parents can support literacy, even if they don't speak the language of instruction, or if they can speak the language but they can't read it. So we have all kinds of scenarios in there with like graphics to show how parents can support. And then I do have something to share with you, and I will need to send it to you. We have a project for family literacy right now, and we have 1,000 books in English and Spanish for free, and lessons for reading comprehension and vocabulary that are in podcasts such as iHeartRadio. And we're trying to also put it with WhatsApp. We the what we're providing to you in the process, it has evidence to it, but the family part of it, we're just getting started, and I don't have the evidence for that yet. But what we're trying to do is bring the evidence-based practices that have been done and researched, and bring it to the family through these podcasts and through these, we're putting them now on WhatsApp and making them available. And a submission has been made for the IDA conference in San Antonio. So I don't know if it'll get accepted, but what I can do is let me send to you, and you all can distribute like the QR code and the way that families can get. And what it is we've taught teachers to do this work. Now, I was sitting talking to Dr. Kay Widgekamar saying, you know what, we need on Saturdays and Sundays when they're home, instead of watching cartoons and stuff, that they could, they can listen and or read, and they can extend their vocabulary and comprehension through these evidence-based practices. And so those are all for free, and I can send you the links to those and QR codes.
Thank you so much. I'll have Aisha close out with a few closing remarks, but I'm just applauds from all of us. And Zoom applause is never really what it should be, but that was so wonderful. I learned so much.
No
Yeah.
worries. Thank you all for being here in the evening. Oh, thank you for golly, you're so quick. Oh my gosh.
Sorry, my computer was having a party while I was trying to work, so it didn't quite come together.
Oh
But
my gosh, I love that.
I just wanted to close with, the 4 L's that you presented with us earlier. It really stood out to me: the listen, learn, lead, and literacy for all. And I wanted to just share this out with everyone and kind of, use this as a foundation for the work that we're doing. And we really, I know I'm speaking for myself and my other colleagues, but we really appreciate what you've presented us with today. And we really hope that we can keep this conversation going to support these students in our district and for all people listening. So.
And I try to use this too as I work with the different communities that, aren't quite so sure about our work, that I'm trying to listen and learn from them. And I hope that they will listen and learn from us as well, so we can go ahead and lead to literacy with these students. So thank you. I try to abide by those 4 L's.
Thank you. And I'll give it back over to the IDA.
Thank you again. I hope you're seeing all the thanks in the chat. Just a wonderful event, really empowering, and just so important to all of us here. So thank you again. Just for those of you who are with us still, thanks for sticking with us. We do have the voting in, and for all the members, we have 100%. All of our members were voted in 100%. So welcome new board members, and we'll orient you later, early in the fall. If you're around in October of this year, we have Sally and Bennett Shaywitz joining us. That will be a physical event, I know. So if you're in DC, Dr. Cardenas Hagan,
That's awesome.
We'd love to have you with us and Sally and Bennett. So again, that will be a in-person event at American University. So please save the date. And then again, please stay in touch with IDA. I know we've gone a little long, but there's our website, our YouTube channel. This event will be recorded. We also, again, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Thank you, Elsa. Thank you, Aisha.
Yes,
what a wonderful evening.
Thank you all. Thank you for sticking with us on an evening. I know y'all are tired.
That was wonderful. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.